name's Darren, welcome to my workshop. There are multiple ways to store your tools in the workshop, and I reckon I've tried most of them, from toolboxes to toolboards, tool cupboards, pegboards, you name it, I've done it. Lately I've been putting my tools in tool drawers. I find that easy because they're easy to access. You can see exactly what you're getting if your tools are laid out well. You can fit a large number of tools in a small area, especially if you lay your drawers out well, and that's what this video is about. Just some ideas on how to lay out your drawers for your tools and a few techniques on how it's done. Now, I used to have foam in my drawers. You'll see some video on that in a minute. And you'll see that while it looks very neat and you can lay your tools out nicely with a bit of foam, it does tend to take up a fair bit of space. You fit a lot less tools in there. So unless you need the protection while you're moving around, like a camera case or the equivalent, or really high precision gear, I wouldn't worry. Just go with something other than foam. You'll fit more tools in the little spaces provided. All right, let's have a look. This is a nice, neat way for me to store my screwdrivers and Allen keys, but unfortunately, neat though it is, it doesn't fit all my screwdrivers and Allen keys. So I need to sort something else out. This is what my screwdriver drawer looks like now. It's not as attractive as when it was the foam with the cutouts, but there's certainly a lot more screwdrivers in there now. And it's functional and it works. Right, the next thing to tackle and tidy up is the drawer for my files and rasps. You'll see a couple of different ways to go about dividing up the file drawer. I could put in a base plate at the bottom of the drawer, the dimensions of the drawer. I just made it a 3mm MDF, say 569 by 391. That's what I measured it up to be. And then take strips of this flooring, let me pan around. I take thin strips of this flooring and separate the files out accordingly, so as to stop them from banging around when the drawers open and close. Or conversely, I could take a heap of this stuff and actually line the bottom of the drawer. Conversely, I could take a heap of this flooring and line the bottom of the drawer with it, and then cut out sections for the tools. I've decided to go with a very simple subtractive method for storing the files and rasps. I've put a board in. I'm not going to fill the whole bottom of the drawer. All I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this piece of flooring here, or there's actually two pieces of flooring here where you can see them, and I'm going to route out sections for these. Obviously I have some fat ones and some thin ones. Now I want this to be generic, so if I replace something, it doesn't have to be an exact fit. So for the flat chisels, I'm going to make them as the width of the for the flat files, I'm going to make them all the width of whichever one's the widest. And the same with the tail, rat tail files and triangle files. Although I've only got two of those and one of those. I will go slightly oversized, so if I have to replace them, I can easily enough. I'll leave a gap on the end for my roll of little hand rasps, and I've got some similar shaped little files here as well, which I will make a little box for and hopefully sit it in at the end, and we can fit them. Well, they're not all going to fit nicely, but we'll sort something out. You can see here I'm marking out where the flat chisels and rasps will sit. The squiggled out areas are the bits I'm going to cut away with the router, leaving the bits in between to hold them in place. To make sure I make nice straight cuts when I'm cutting away the excess wood for the files and rasps in the plate for them, organising tray for them, whatever you want to call it, I've set up this little jig here, or well, it's a Festool track, which I'll be running the OF1010 along with a router bit in it. And either side I have a piece of the same size stock. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to cut into the first piece of stock so I can see where the router bit goes, and then I'll be able to slide my main piece of stock between these two rails, lining it up with the cut in this piece of wood each time to make sure the cuts line up with the stock. Confusing? It'll make more sense in a tick. And so there it is. When I make my cuts, they have to line up with these two edges. And that's it. I can slide my piece of wood backwards and forwards, as you will soon see. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is tidy up these areas where it is rounded instead of square at the ends where I've got things. Where it is actually a round or a triangle file, I'm going to leave them rounded, but where I've had to do multiple passes and it's uneven, that I will clean up. Alright, let's start with this one, because it's as good a place as any. Just going to line that up there and give it a little tap. And it's just a case of repeating this process until everything's nice and square. I've still got a little bit there I've got to take out. That's the edges all squared off. So now I'm just grabbing a little bit of sandpaper here, a little bit of 240 grit. I'm just going to go over these edges here. One, it gets rid of any little bits of splintery tear out that are sticking over the edge. But more importantly, it makes sure these edges aren't sharp. So later on down the track, I don't cut my finger on the thing. Now, to make sure this doesn't slide around when I open and close the drawer, I'm just going to put a dab of hot melt glue just in the corners here on the wood. That'll stick against the edge and hold it all in place. Great stuff, hot melt glue. If you haven't got one for your workshop, get yourself a hot melt glue gun. They're not a fantastic thing for permanent fixing of things, you wouldn't repair something where you would normally use araldite or super glue with hot melt glue, but for tacking things in place on a semi-permanent basis, or even just a temporary basis, the stuff can't be beaten. That won't move now. That'll stay in place forever and a day until I try and pry it away, and then that'll give away nicely. There we go, and that's what the drawer looks like now with the files organised properly. Here's another example of the problems of having your tool drawers too tailor-made for your items. When you upgrade things, you can't always fit them anymore. For example, I had to buy a new calculator because the old one died, and you can see the cutout compared to the new calculator. And all these things I've got here fit very nicely, but in reality this is what it looks like on any given day because there's just more stuff than fits in the drawer. And I've got other measuring and marking items in a cupboard elsewhere, so it would be nice to be able to fit everything into one drawer and still have some flexibility that when I upgrade things or things break and need to be replaced, they would fit in. I mean, I'm pleased with the way things fit. For example, my square fits in nicely supported on this piece of wood, so that helps keep it nicely supported. Likewise, my Veritas bevel gauge, it's got a nice little cutout there for the knurled knob underneath it. My pocket square, it's got a nice little piece to keep it in. So yeah, everything fits nicely, but again, it's all just too tailor-made, really. It needs to be more flexible. New day, new drawer to organise. I've taken the foam out of the bottom of the drawer, and I'm just using that as a template at the moment to get a rough idea of how I'm going to lay things out. For the bottom of the drawer, I'm going to use 2 layers of 3mm MDF laminated together. So I've got one full-size piece there, and then 2 smaller pieces just that I've cut the size to make up the same size as the bottom. I'll glue those together, and that's to give me some room for a screw to bite into.
Okay, now, slap these bits together and weigh them down with stuff. I'll need a tiny trim when it's all done to bring it to size. Alright, something. See, I have multiple uses.
I'm going to trim this piece of pine to size, just a little bit bigger than a 30cm ruler plus the loop on the end of it, to make a little piece to store my rulers in, which will in turn attach to that board I've just shown you. So here we go. I'm just going to chop this board down to size, and then we're going to put some grooves in him. Okay, you can see here I've only got the saw blade teeth protruding up by 5mm. Probably easier if I move a piece of timber out the way. So, sorry, 7mm. So there's only 7mm of tooth sticking up above the surface there, so only a very shallow cut. And that's all we really need into this block of wood to hold the rulers in place. So this is the piece for holding the rulers now. It's almost complete. You can see where the rulers slot in, like such. Like that. And then this one here, which is my 90-degree Incra rule, will sit in there, but I'm going to put a little support under there just to hold that at a nice angle so it sits comfortably. And then of course the whole thing will sit in the drawer that way round, I think. There we go. Or maybe long ways. We'll see how they go in the end. What I'm going to do now is rip a heap of strips of wood from old scraps down to 10mm wide, and I'll use those as the spaces between the bits in the drawer, or the items in the drawer. Got my micro jig set up with my offset to stop it from tipping while I'm using it. What I'm doing now is I'm trial fitting pieces and then putting the spaces in between. So here we have these items and then a spacer. In here we're going to have these items. I'm just going to put a cap on the top there to stop it from sliding up and hitting the edge. So basically this is what's happening here with these. I need all this measuring and marking stuff on the table because I keep having to reference to it. But if I take one of these, this is basically what I'm doing. That piece is designed to go there, so we put a little bit of glue. Just a little bit of glue. There we go. Just doing that to spread the glue around a bit better. There we go, that seems to have worked nicely. And then I'm going to flip this up the other way and just put a couple of brads in it just to hold it in place while the glue sets. But, I mean, the brads will stay there permanently, so yeah. There we go, so I'm just repeating that process until all of my separators are in place, and then I will paint the whole thing red. You can see I've already put the first coat on my ruler stand. Why red, you ask? Well, years ago when I was in the Air Force, the drawers in the tools, the little plastic tubs in the tool drawers were all red. And so, I don't know, red just seems right to me for a tool drawer. So I thought while I was down at the hardware store, I would pick up some paint, because I don't want it. I originally started to paint it gold, and you can see that looks awful. So I don't want to leave it as gold. So yeah, red it's going to be. So there we are, that's the top drawer finished, all painted red and good to go. You can see here where I've used my wooden dividers, as I was saying I was doing. They've come up quite well with the red. I've cheated in a couple of spots, as you can see here. For example, my marking gauges, I've actually printed out little plastic blocks. I could have made them out of wood, but I don't think I'd have done quite as good a job on such small fiddly pieces as I've done there. I've got MG stamped in it for marking gauge. Nice and easy. Also, I've cheated again for this one, for my square, by putting a little bracket here to support the blade with little keepers at the ends. Previously, in the last drawer, I just had a block of wood supporting the blade, and the stock was held in place to stop it sliding around the drawer. This holds it in place as well, of course, very nicely. It's a little bit lighter and takes up less space in the drawer. That's another advantage of the plastic, which is why I also used it for the pen holder and the tape measure, because it just takes up a lot less space. than the wood. You can see the wood is 10mm. So I'll put those up on Thingiverse in case you want to use those. But any of this could be done with wood. You'd just be left with slightly less space than what I've had in the couple of bits I've used there. You can see I've got a nice gap left over between things here for a few pieces. And another gap here which I've utilised with a little clip for my scratch awl. There we go. Lovely, clips in beautifully there, or at least it does if you're not looking at the camera and you're looking at what you're doing and you press on it. There you go. Excellent. So everything's held in really well and I'm very pleased with it. On to the next drawer. I was very pleased with how the measuring and marking drawer looked in red, so I've gone back and I've done my file drawer with a bit of red paint as well, covering over the wood grain that was there before. Normally I like a nice wood finish, but I think here in this instance a bit of red paint does the trick. I'm thinking perhaps rails along the sides here, or front and back, so as we can have a tray that slides around, leaving an exposed area underneath which will be divided up to allow me to hold those wherever they end up going. Stencils, templates. Let's have a look at the French curve, see what we can do with that, see if we can fit that into the picture. Yeah, that takes up a lot of space, but we could divide it lengthways. Let's have a look. And have those bits at the front sliding round on top. What I'm doing here is just putting in a bottom set of rails really for trays on top to run on. So a few pieces like this, little box up one end and another rail down this end, and then the top pieces will be able to slide along there or lift off if I have two of them. Probably one that slides would be ideal because it would make getting to the bottom easier. So I'm just going to stick it all in place with hot melt glue, this bottom rail or bottom set of rails. And the reason for using hot melt glue is, or reasons, it's just dripping. The reasons for using hot melt glue are that it sets nice and quickly and it can be removed later on if need be. So we get these things in place and straight away they're going to stay there like that. And because the steel of the drawer is cold, it actually sets quite quickly, which is good. Makes life easy. I'll stick the next one in place. Like so. Don't really want that lump, I'll pick that lump off later. Got to be quick with the old hot melt glue, and you a bit like super glue sometimes on certain surfaces where you stick it down and you go to move it and too late it's stuck. I found that with the drawer above this, the red measuring and marking drawer. A bit of super glue in a couple of spots. I thought I'd move the things, but no, they hit and they stuck. At least this is easy to remove if you do have a mistake. Alright, so we're down to the last one. We'll just put that one down here in this corner, or along this front edge. And then we'll have to design the top trays. And I'm going to need a new glue gun. This one's dying. The actual tip's melting. Ha! Ah well, it's years old. It's served me well. Maybe I'll get a battery hot melt glue gun next. That'd be a good idea. Alright, so that's the bottom portion of the drawer done. And like I say, the trays will be able to slide on top of these. These are all 20mm thick, which is just enough really for my plastic templates. That's all it's really there for. There we go, they'll fit in nicely. All of them. And then my other pieces will slide across the top, and I'm still connected by a web of glue. Now that the rails are in place, what I need is 3 little lift-out trays that total slightly less than the width of this blue drawer. So they can be slid around so you can see what's underneath, and you can lift them out easily without them getting in the way. So first of all, what I need is something to make a base out of. So I've got this piece of plywood that might do the trick, and yeah, it's just slightly less than the total width of the drawer there, so that's ideal. So I just need to paint that red and then make some sides for it. Now I'm just playing around with these lengths or sides to see how far apart I want them or how wide I want the trays. So this base is my total width, and now I'm dividing them up accordingly, just laying the tools out, seeing where I want them, you know, what fits where, what do I want where. Here I'm just drilling holes in the sides of my pieces for my trays, the side rails of those trays, just so as I can pick them out easily later on, something to give my fingers something to grip onto. So I've put in a little piece of wood against the back fence just to push these out a little bit. Because they're so narrow, they sit so close to the fence that the chuck hits the fence, or wood. So I've using that as a spacer, and I've got a block clamped down at the end to keep them in line. So there we go, I can do 2 at a time, otherwise they poke over the spacer and won't stay aligned, but that's alright, 2 at a time is good. So there we go, that's how I'm putting my finger holes in. So now this drawer is complete. You can see I've divided it into 2 sections. We've got one section up here where I've got my flexible curve ruler that I've never used, but I'm sure will come in handy one day. And down here I've got my circle templates, oval template. I've got an adjustable triangle here for marking out angles, actually from way back, it's a draftsman's triangle, and a French curve. And they all fit nicely in there. And then on top of those, we've got the trays. Now I built this tray first, and I built it to be an exact fit in here. What I didn't allow for was the fact that the front of the drawer has a bit of a 5mm lip just here. So getting this one in, you kind of have to stick it forward first and down and in we go, which works, but you know, I might want to get them in and out quicker. I didn't scrap it, I just built the next 2 a little bit smaller. So they just plonk straight in like so. The only problem with that, of course, is now they can move backwards and forwards a little bit within the drawer, but that's no big deal. So there you go. There's a look at a few different ways of organising your drawers and a couple of techniques on how it's done. Hopefully that's been of some help to you. Maybe you've got some better ideas or some different ideas on the way you've done things. I'd certainly love to know. Please leave a comment down below. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.